Welcome back to Beyond Revenue, where every Friday we explore how revenue leaders actually build sustainable growth inside real organizations. I'm your host, Michael Jäger, and the idea behind this show is simple. Instead of repeating playbooks or theory, we want to talk about the real decisions leaders make when scaling revenue, the cultural shifts, the operational changes, sometimes the mistakes that shape how teams actually perform. And today I'm extremely happy. I'm joined by Crevan O'Malley, VP Upmarket Sales and MD for EMEA at HubSpot. Crevan, you have spent your career leading sales teams across global technology companies. You have developed a strong perspective on what it takes to build a high-performing sales organization, especially when growth depends not on just strategy, but on culture, emotional intelligence, and alignment across teams. So I'm extremely happy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Michael, likewise, delighted to be here, delighted to get a chance to talk to your listeners and really looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So before we dive into the leadership side of sales, let's set the stage. Can you briefly explain your role today at HubSpot and what your focus is when leading corporate sales across EMEA?
Of course. So as you mentioned in the intro, I am the Vice President for HubSpot's Upmarket Sales team across EMEA. We define upmarket as two sales segments, our mid-market team and our corporate team. Our mid-market sellers look after customers and prospects with more than 50 employees, and our corporate teams take over from 501 plus. I also have responsibility for our channel partner ecosystem. Obviously, with larger businesses, with more complex requirements, we go to market with our partner community. The implementation plan is just as vital as the software, making sure that the software does what it was intended to do. That application layer combined with good practice around go live, data integrations, and just ongoing support is a critical part. So working with those three parts of the business make up the upmarket team within EMEA. And you mentioned the additional responsibility of being the managing director for HubSpot in EMEA. So that gives me kind of an overall responsibility for our 2,700 plus people across the region. We have a number of offices and countries that we operate in, and obviously we service a lot more countries. HubSpot is up over 290,000 customers, with quite a high percentage of those in our region. So yeah, it's a role that has a lot of responsibility, but it's one that I'm incredibly motivated and driven to be successful at. And I get to work with incredible people. So enjoying my role right now.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Congrats on your very impressive career. I think you really built something and it pays off leading such a great region. So I'm still very amazed what you have done in your career. Thank you very much for joining. You've led teams or sales teams across multiple growth phases, organizational changes. So this is a great opportunity, in my opinion, to talk about what modern sales leadership actually looks like in practice. So when you think about the best sales team you've worked with, what cultural element tends to make the biggest difference in performance?
You're touching on a really interesting point there. I think companies of all sizes are challenged to meet the moment that we find ourselves in, certainly today. It's incredibly difficult for any go-to-market team. And that's not just sales, but people who engage at the front line with customers, whether it's marketeers, after-sales customer success teams, pre-sales teams, our partner community. They turn up on deals with us as part of our team. And you're finding right now that there is a very, very extended procurement process within businesses. There's a high degree of anxiety and a risk appetite that is reduced. And people want to make sure that where they're placing their bets, the partners that they engage with, the technology that they invest in will actually give them the outcomes that they want. It is not about simply having users and having the application go live. It's about making sure that once it does that, it delivers real outcomes and real value to the business. So I think what's interesting about that is, in my experience, people spend a lot of time on the technology itself and doing the comparisons between lots of incredible tools that are available in the marketplace, depending on the requirements, as they should. But not enough time is spent on the human side of change management. and making sure that there's commitment at the most senior level so that people across the organization know that this is a change moment, this is change management. In my experience, and I've worked in the CRM systems for over 20 years, usually it's around the human in the loop. It's around the change management of process and operations that doesn't get mapped out in the same way that the tech stack does. And the integrations of data is important, but the handoffs between humans who are servicing your customers is absolutely crucial. And I think, bringing people on that journey to understand that culturally, you may be changing a platform or an application, but the work practices, how we do what we need to do, the efficiency, the productivity that we want to gain from this investment means that the way in which we operated in the past has to change. And in my experience,
Absolutely.
Many businesses do a good job at that, more so now than ever. I think people are leaning into that side of it, and our partner community do a great job. But when there is a failure in an investment or a project, to me, it goes back to that change management on the culture
100%.
side.
We see that actually extremely often, right? So first of all, they believe these tools have a need on their own, right? So moving from one to the other while not changing their process, expect something different is already a questionable action. So, and I think the companies got much better in defining how they actually need to operate in the new world. But what we see more or less, I would say in 8 out of 10 projects, is the training and change management and real enablement structure is completely neglected. They just rush over and say, look, our leaders will help them to work in the new system. And then we are like, hey, the leaders have no time. They need to drive business. Enablement needs to be taken serious. And if you take it serious, you need to allocate quite some significant budget into it to make it successful, because we have seen so many system change, and then there's 2 days go live training. I worked 20 years in a different tool, and then it's expected that the people know.
You make a really interesting point there, Michael. I think it's worth just pulling that thread for another minute. You said it, like a huge amount of a procurement cycle, a sales process goes into assessing the technology, as it should. It has to meet the requirements and the needs, and every business is different. But certainly in an AI native agentic era that we're in right now, that human component, that profile of person that you have in seat, that you hire as you grow your business, is absolutely crucial. So there's no doubt we're in a significant moment in the history of technology moving through this agentic era, and companies and people finding their ideal path forward. But the types of people that companies will hire in the future will need to be really comfortable with those types of tools and the changing landscape that they'll find themselves in to maximize the return on operating in that era. Because, we certainly believe that people and humans are the differentiator in successful businesses, have been in the past and will be in the future. And creating a framework for them to do their best work is effectively what will differentiate the winners in the future.
Absolutely.
Of course, the technology is critical. It's ever more critical today than perhaps ever. But the people, and making sure that they're with you on the journey, and that they're the right type of people to optimize for the opportunity that's in front of us all right now, because it is significant. Even though it's quite challenging, it's a significant opportunity. That's something that I'm really interested in working with our customers and our teams on.
I 100% agree, because I think what companies quite often forget is the emotional part, how you buy, right? And it's in the end, if you build trust through the human connection, and you build trust with people who are experts, but they very well prepared, they come at the right time with the right topics, but then build the trust layer through the interaction and enabling the team members to work with the new technologies and make them own them in a way that they can focus on building the trust. That's going to be the differentiator. And for that, you need to have a structured way of working and really help them how to work, because the new technology, in my opinion, will just increase the mess if you have a messy setup, and then it will put off the focus of the client, right? You need to focus on, I don't know, getting used to the systems or understanding what's really the signal, instead of using the technologies to be able to focus on the needs of your clients.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, we talk about this, the agentic platform shift era that we're in, and the opportunity and the potential that it gives individuals and companies to do better work and to serve their customers in a more meaningful, productive way is enormous. But I think people do need to work out how they meet this moment and how they show
100%.
up with that combination of technology, their people, and of course, their core business, what it is that they do and what it is that they want to deliver for their customers. And there was a blog recently shared by our Chief Product Officer, Duncan Lennox, and it kind of shared what HubSpot's commitment to this is in the next wave of this agentic era. And it's really about a kind of a multi-layered architecture. And I don't mean to be getting technical, but what I do think this shows is how important context and insight and aggregation of data. You talked about data, that data layer where contacts, deals, conversations, structured data, unstructured data, where 80% of the data sits, and being able to gather that together and draw really powerful insights for next steps, next actions, empowering and enabling GTM people to do their best work. That combined with what we would call the intelligence layer. So taking signal, as you said, from that data in a smart way, being able to work at pace, looking at benchmarks, understanding what next actions will get the best outcome, not just for the business, but of course, but for the customer, and what it is that you need to help guide them. Because I think, there's an interesting point in this age, as exciting and challenging as it is. People want to talk to subject matter experts, and that's very challenging because things are changing so quickly. But building that trust and understanding deeply what are the problems that you want to solve. And I think that context layer that we bring with, over 290,000 customers, that is a lot of contacts, transactions, deals, insights, cross-vertical, cross-geo. Being able to bring that context layer is a differentiator that no standalone model can replicate. And I think that's a pretty powerful piece.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it requires one thing on the client side, or when you structure your own go-to-market, it requires focus, right? Because rushing over it just to run to the next quick win and then fixing it around will not work anymore in the future, because you have so many different tools connected with different layers as described. The excellent structuring or the excellent operational model, right? We always call it like a GTM factory, right? Really defining how you operate and how to understand the client's needs, their pains, and how to identify and then work against them to really build a case together. That requires that focus. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the companies, not rushing over the details. Yeah, because if you're not good in the details, it will not work. If you're good in the details, then it will work to build the different layers.
Do you know what's really interesting? I remember previously in my career, the value that you bring to your customers was perceived to be wrapped up in your technology, in your solution, the things that you do as a vendor for your customers. And, we wanted sort of exclusive relationships. We wanted people on our tools, on our platform. And again, in Duncan's post, and it's current, so it's top of mind for me and for lots of our customers. This concept of being open by design with huge intentionality on, rather than having this sort of walled garden approach, we're committing to full API parity. So anything that's doable inside the UI needs to be doable via an API. And I think there's an interesting point there about organizations who are trying to support people meet this agentic moment. If there was a personality attached to this and our positioning, I think it's one of humility. We're not saying that we will solve every single problem. We feel we could do quite a lot on that journey, especially on the go-to-market piece. But there are some incredible tools. And in B2B, multiple applications and multiple tools are the story of everybody's
Yeah,
daily
absolutely.
work. So you need a platform and a system that can not just aggregate the data from a first party perspective, but can take it from multiple tools and give you that holistic view for the best possible insights. And I think that's really important. And then, of course, it's not an overly technical point, but, with live MCP servers, connectors to all the LLMs, I mean, it's just incredibly exciting to see where people are able to take their data. And we need to be facilitators. Yeah, we need to be facilitators there.
And I think HubSpot has a very competitive advantage there, right? Being already built it in a very good open way, easy to connect, good API definition. So it's definitely a decision worth to just because you're so open and so flexible in connecting different tools to go for HubSpot than some other tools, I think.
You mentioned the word trust earlier on, and maybe just to wrap out this point, trust as infrastructure, trust not just as part of the human relationship, which of course it is, right? Even in this age, we end up having conversations like this one and we connect or we don't. And, that's an important part of the dynamic. It absolutely is. But that stated position of, while agents and AI tooling needs to work on customers' behalf and give them real value and real outcomes, not just usage, not just license, but actual outcomes that make a difference to their bottom line. We're treating the governance, the transparency, the security of data as an infrastructural piece to build trust so that people can feel secure. If they partner with us, we have the security of their data as an absolute top priority. And you need to know where agents access data, what they're doing with it. There's got to be governance in that sense. And I think that may be a point that's not completely part of the narrative today, where it feels like people could vibe code their CRM. And by the way, that may well be the right path for many, but I don't think it's the path for all. I truly believe that there's a role for that kind of central CRM platform acting
100%.
as that data governance command center.
The governance is there, the key word, I would say, because governance, role organizations, and this is going to be in, let's say, bigger companies. It's not going to be possible to just wipe code something. And then the risk connected to it, not understanding what's going to be accessed and what not, especially in Europe, is going to be a too high risk.
Just on that, and for a very final point, I don't think it's either or.
No,
I think
absolutely.
In an environment like HubSpot's a big company, and we certainly have the type of CRM infrastructure that I talked to. And yet we have an incredibly dynamic, fast-moving group of people on the GTM side who are using multiple tools, from LLMs to other third-party AI applications. But it's that working in combination, knowing that the platform gives this central control on data, but also aggregates it in a way that makes that agentic operation really accelerate and really be highly productive. So it's that combination between the two, I think, is the future.
It's always about the question, what's the basis, right? What's the backbone? Where is the governance there? And what we can put on top or besides to run efficiency, in my opinion. But let's jump into the two tactics which actually you applied with us, which had a successful outcome, and one tactic which you applied which didn't. So it would be nice if you could start with the first one, saying, look, what was the initial situation? What did you think about? What was the tactic you applied and what was the outcome? Because I think as more tangible it is, as more people can learn from and actually apply it in their own companies.
Yeah, well, it'll be no surprise to you, Michael, or your listeners, that after what would be 27 years in tech sales, I probably have a longer list of things that didn't work. But I'm quite happy to share. Interesting in the context of the conversation that we had, the sort of tactics and the stories that I'll tell talk to the very human inputs to the role of sales or the role of GTM professionals. I think today, and it was ever the case, for sellers to be successful, for businesses to be successful, they need a healthy pipeline. And pipeline is made up essentially of conversations with prospects and your ability to story tell and build interest and create interest in your product and service and build that compelling narrative and be competitive. And we love that process as GTM professionals. But one of the things that I think gets in the way is people becoming too emotionally invested in the process and not sticking to some sort of rigorous framework that decides what deals go forward and, frankly, what deals don't. I think salespeople, in my experience, I'm one, can be quite emotional. You get attached to processes. Yes. And hope is good, but at some point you need to be able to call it. And I think having a clean pipeline at the individual seller level, if you're a manager with 7 or 8 reps, if you run an organization as a sales director, maybe the most beneficial thing you can do is create an environment and an expectation that pipeline is super clean and deals are in the right month. They've got follow-up steps. People know exactly what's happening. The right people are supporting, because nobody is winning solo. The age of that kind of lone wolf seller is gone, which actually reverses back onto the data issue, because when these deals are set up properly in the type of environment that we've been talking about, you get more insight and you get more people who have visibility on that engagement. And that sort of is self-fulfilling, because it helps clean and you get questions. And when you're questioned in deal reviews and other, you tend to be sharper and you tend to do a better job. So I think having an inflated view of your pipeline is really, really challenging. And it will lead to false confidence, weak forecasts, slip deals. The core responsibility of a sales organization is to deliver on their number. And I think having a really, really rigorous approach to having quality at every step in the journey, having discussions. So the technology is fabulous, but having that opportunity as a sales leader to sit down with your sellers and try and create a trusted environment. This is not about the senior leader poking holes in anybody's work. This is about us aligning on what it is we offer. Where are we with a particular engagement? And can we really do what we feel is needed in that moment? And if we can, we move forward and we invest, because every hour, every call, every moment we spend on these deals has a cost, and we want to make sure that the return is healthy. So, make sure that pipeline review is taken seriously. Encourage reps to have an open, challenging, challenger mindset on every deal and every dollar. And I think that will improve processes and collaboration throughout the organization and even post-sale, because with that type of discipline, I think you end up with a better quality of deal at the back end.
100%. But you speak out of my soul, right? That's what we're trying to preach and implement quite often, right? Proper governance, proper operating rhythm within the teams. Very thoughtful tactic. What is the second tactic you would say you see as important, or did apply?
I think, there's definitely a challenge around a counter to perhaps what I just talked about. And I think in this age of an unbelievable amount of data at our fingertips, sometimes we can drown in the noise and miss the signal. And it's kind of connected to what I talked about in terms of quality pipeline, but I think it shows up in every interaction and how we do our work, how we show up in meetings. What is our point of view? What is our perspective? I think if you over-index on data, interestingly, you lose sight of some of the signal that can be really informative in what should the next step be? What is the value proposition? Who do we include in this conversation to get a better outcome? And I think, earlier in my career, I probably attached a higher weighting to the data and the measurement and the metrics. And thankfully, go-to-market roles today, and I believe firmly into the future, will rely heavily on the human in the conversation and the ability to not ignore data and signal at all, but begin to cut through the noise. And you can waste an awful lot of time in your career if you don't have an ability to ask for help as you navigate that journey. And I think it can be, manifested in you're looking at the wrong metrics. I talked about pipeline there. There's so many metrics that can make a pipeline look good, but in reality, it's about your ability to get a deal done. And I think in a modern sales organization, that requirement to be really precise and precision-led in your actions, not volume-led for outcomes, because I don't think that's the right path. And certainly, we talked about the agentic era, in practical terms, that gives really, really smart tooling to sellers and go-to-market people to do that job in a much more efficient, productive way and at speed and at scale.
Absolutely.
And I think, probably over-relying on what the data told me without flying low enough to the deal and being involved in the conversation. I think that's something that I think everybody could benefit from, being closer to the conversation. But I think as you progress your career and, you move into management layers and perhaps further up, that is something that I would treat as an early warning signal. Don't get too far away from the actual conversation or you'll miss real high quality signal.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. And it goes hand in hand with an operating rhythm, how to enable the team members to look at the right metrics while understanding what is your real way of selling, right? What are the metrics you have? What is one tactic you would say you applied which didn't work out, where you had a really ground belief that's the right way to go? What did you decide there and why didn't it work out?
I think sometimes you can feel like the conversation around deal management is where high value exists. Deal reviews, giving guidance, supporting colleagues. But you can definitely end up in a situation where you can get in the way of salespeople doing their job. It is a very, very challenging arena that tech salespeople find themselves in today. And I think leadership need to be cognizant of the fact that, yes, we have to arm them with the correct tools and we have to enable them properly to meet this moment, because the way in which we turn up for our customers and our prospects today is different to how it was in previous years. But I think we need to give people an opportunity to do the work. And in tech today, it can feel incredibly busy, in moments overwhelming. And I think we need to give people space and time to work and learn and, of course, approach the challenge with a high degree of urgency. But I think in the past, you feel like perhaps an enablement session or another deal review, and you kind of end up taking time away from sellers and managers in your desire as a leader to be helpful. And I think in the past, I've sort of reflected on my intent to be positive and probably getting in the way of prioritization of time. And I think we need to listen to people who operate on the front line. I have a role that's very important and I'm proud to lead the organization that I do, but it's not lost on me that our account executives are the ones who are talking to customers every single day. And I will have perspective and opinion, and I'm happy to share it as I am today, but stay close to that front line and get that signal from the AE. And I think in some moments, I created an environment where it kind of got in the way of them doing their work. And that's where really the best insights exist, when that frontline team are talking to our customers.
Yeah, nice. I really like it. Thank you very much for sharing. Let me summarize what we have learned. So the first tactic you apply or this advice you give is look, be very clear in how you operate. Yeah, be clear in the governance. What are the barriers? What is the flow? Deals need to move, and you need to do not get lost in hope or in prolonging deals, right? So understand how you want to operate, define your governance very clear. How do you progress deals? And then understand your rhythm as well, right? Understand what is your cycle, what's your minimum cycle, what's your maximum cycle. Understand when does the conversion rate drops below 1%, because then it's not worth to go on over your entire organization, and then lead your team members accordingly. Help them to progress, point out if they don't be afraid of losing an approach, because you don't lose a deal, you just lose the approach. You still can reconnect in 3 to 6 months. Tactic number 2 is, right, don't get lost in the noise of data. So be very clear or thorough in what do you want to measure and what do you look at, and while relying on the human touch and be close to the conversation. Yeah, I think this goes hand in hand with we call it operating rhythm, right? Where you as the leader support your team members in actually training them in deal or pipeline reviews. I'm a big fan of the deal and pipeline reviews, but not as an update call, rather a training, brainstorming, pointing out call where we really help the sellers and the people on the street to not only understand where they're at, but help them to build the right tactic for the right prospect. While, and I think that's the third advice you gave, while not standing in their way, right? So on the one side, obviously, understand reviews and structures as helping your team members, but not limiting them. Don't get caught in update calls, what you can read on your own in the system. Rather, if you spend the time in a very wise way where they get more out of it, and it increases the probability to close, rather taking the time in needing to report something you can read out on your own. Anything to add, Crevan, which I
did a masterful job summarizing. I would add one more thing, and I think in my career and in the organizations and the teams that I've led, it has definitely made a big difference. And that is really leaning into cross-functional alignment. Like, sales is a challenge. All go-to-market functions are a challenge today, and you do not go alone. You know, if you focus on your metric and your team as a sales leader, you miss the richness of the entire customer journey. And our marketeers, our customer success, our after sales people, our technical salespeople have incredible insight to offer on the breadth of that story and the breadth of that journey, right from a discovery moment to a closing moment. And as a leader, I think my responsibility is to make sure that for my teams, I make sure that these other really excellent cross-functional professionals have insight into what we do, and we understand what they're trying to do. It's a shared scorecard. It's not my metric is the most important. And I think if people think more broadly across the organization, I think they'll be more successful.
Yeah, true. And that's what I missed at the moment, right? You said in 2026, you're not winning a deal on your own. If you think you're winning a deal on your own, you're on the wrong path. Yeah. I think that summarizes it completely. Yeah. Crevan, thank you very much for sharing your perspective.
Pleasure.
Walking us through how you think about go-to-market. I think the start of our conversation was highly interesting, how go-to-market is going to develop. But before we close, where can people follow you? Should we add your LinkedIn? Do you have any other platforms where you share your knowledge? Because I think it's highly valuable.
Yeah, like in this age, connection is so crucial. Sharing perspectives, having conversations like this one, I enjoyed immensely, and I'm grateful. People will find me on LinkedIn in the follow-on content. We can be sure to link that there. And you know, my style, I think, is open and transparent. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I certainly like to spend time with people who can shape and inform opinion. So great to meet you today, Michael. Pleasure to get an opportunity to speak to some of your listeners. And I look forward to extending the network as we go.
Nice. So that's it for today's episode of Beyond Revenue. Crevan, thank you very much for joining us. And of course, to all of you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. I believe it's absolutely valuable that more people listen in. If you want to learn building a leading sales team, or if you want to especially think about how culture, leadership, and emotions will influence your future performance, then this is the right episode for you. So new episode drops every Friday. Real lessons, no fluff. I'm Michael Jäger, your host. Crevan, thank you very much. And goodbye.
Thank you, Michael.